Tiwaina kiranza karatin diwara.
So, any questions? Any kind of questions?
Yeah.
So when we are talking about the intensity in verse number 5, the intensity of the desire to renunciate, it is said through growing accustomed to thinking in this way, but it really means through more and more intensity of suffering.
Through more contemplation on suffering.
So is it possible to access the intensity of desire to renunciate without having to suffer so much, but really to escape that step and to really just grow the contemplation, just nourish the contemplation?
Tini tandanga zugi sholoka ngaba jira. Tandangi jung jibe tse la jira. Tina la tidar kombe korwe pinso la yimi geji tsamya michi shinsra. Ninze gundu taba tuenyi lo juna detsi ni jung jiba la tina la tanga zugi tidar kombe la jira. Tila du zamba samlo tit shu chenpo tonne ra. Samlo shu chenpo tonne du zamba samlo ki 다 코랄 시험바 잡고지 제고래 라기 기자 디시기로 왔어. 아니 다 된대기 니 코알라 다 조셰라. 된대 니중지 지엘라 안 코알라 조셰 숙심보지 된고도 왔어 담보. 코알라 조셰 숙심보 된고 라텔라스라. 소소 아니 무스라. 동이 숙심보지 냥네라. 아니 텔라테니 코알라 조셰 된고레서 오스라. 나나 동이 코랑라 파삼로도 똥라. 아니 곰다자 라 텐데치니 조셰디 댕고르베스 라 소소 무스 동예 마뇽네스 라 아니 텐데기 니중 라 제기 줄라도에 아니 조셰디 덴톱기르베스
내내 물에 쿠이도네 삼배심이다 내내 물에 쿠이도면 쿠이도가 제가 나시기 동이라서 도와 라 비나가서 때 잠자래 때다이 lo gemba로 차르나 당아 신나 딱거리라 질려 콜로 등이 쉬어라 기타 신은 파일라 도에코 러서 거의 하고 말대 라 다딜라 진 당한 가시야베 여러분 나디니 되도 다다 나디월레데 신에 가서래 된리오도 베도코르 지칼로다 추미주로 통해줘라 이마죠 다이나 단당아 저기 갈라나 시버 콜레 아니 인주체 시버 코에도 가는뭐 가는 지우지나야 간다 동의가 라신이 바지 라 진짜 인사 딱 들래 탄도도 안 타에 바지 하고 타에 바 하고 근데 타바 되니 글로 들한지를 ចេ니 아니 들래 비즈니스 근데 질로 찍고래 라와라 다디 근데 인주체서 들한테는 지중나 디기도 신에 가서 파다나 하고다 라 된지미 소소를 중고에 집어치려면다 라 메셔봤던다 가서 다가라래 단다 소소를 녀면은 마음방가 갈때 동해드는 로를 사야지
So then, before we kind of touch upon bringing forth such an intense and dissatisfaction with samsara, we first need to understand what exactly do we mean by renunciation and what is the contributing cause which can help us bring forth such a true sense of renunciation. And now, when we are talking about renunciation, this renunciation is brought forth by contemplating on the suffering of samsara, not just a particular instance of samsara, but the suffering which marks samsaric existence generally. So, when we are talking about it, we can simply understand suffering in this context as referring to the suffering of birth itself, aging, sickness, and death. These are inescapable as long as you are in samsara. You are not free from these kind of sufferings. So, as a starting point, we begin to contemplate on these things. that we have no control over the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death. And now, one kind of manner in which we develop a mistaken notion of renunciation is to equate with this kind of feeling that one might develop. For example, there might be an old person who is suffering through a physical illness, and he or she is in their old age. So then they begin to kind of say that, oh, it's pointless for me to live anymore. It's better for me to die. This is not what we mean by samsara, developing a sense of renunciation towards samsaric existence. What we mean by developing true renunciation means that even as we kind of experience samsaric existence, even when we have moments wherein we begin to kind of develop a sense of joy with these kind of worldly pursuits, we need to understand that the joy that we gain from these things are very fleeting in nature. It changes into suffering after a while. So this is the manner in which we develop true renunciation. Yes.
When you say contemplating meditation,
Tini nganzu ki samlo tong la jora ta dinde kola. Koa la ni choshe che la samlo tong gore, koa ki dungyen la samlo tong gore la jora. Samlo tong la de ni gom jaya la kogi yore bes. Yana gom jaya la kogo be nyeba yore be yo mare bes.
Ale di ko la jeshi tigal samta la gom la da. Ta tire kran chita gom la da ga gom anja ya siansi dile me mitin tizo ena gom do charo ra. Tigal samta ta ga koi dungye de khande jire do khande le do tigal ta ga samta ra. Kisi chana ya si tigal ta de na gom chara.
So herein, when you ask this question whether contemplation equates to meditation, so we need to first understand what do we exactly mean by meditation in the Buddhist context. So meditation is simply understood as a process of familiarization, becoming habituated with a thing or with the object of meditation, becoming familiar with the object of meditation. So now, if we understand meditation in this manner, then with regards to the contemplation that we undertake about the sufferings of samsara, if we kind of always familiarize ourselves with this way of thinking about samsara, we habituate ourselves with this way of thinking about the dissatisfaction that we experience in samsara, then maybe we can understand it as an act of meditation too, this simple contemplation again and again on the nature of suffering in samsara.
a lot of times we know, we try to learn these things and know these things, read about things, but not necessarily even after not necessarily we are able to do or bring about those changes in our life. So how is it different? And this, actual meditation practice which we do, like different practices of meditation, they help in this process, or it happens independently? Because a lot of times
Independently of what?
Independently, I mean without any sort of meditation practices happening, just the contemplation of things. Because in my experience, I think a lot of times I contemplate about a lot of things, I read about it, but maybe not been able to put it in practice. But when I meditated, it became much more easier for me to deal with those things.
Tatanda moi chiwa di dirto, nganzogi dinde tsawa rawa da, ini nganzogi pecha mangbochi logi rawas. Teta dinde ki rik dawa dinde mangbo, ini pelo chiya la soba, tela dis, ini lomnir chiya la soba dinde mangbochi ki rawas. Ini tela dinde kodo la yadi da nye rugu dawas. Ta ina yang ti kayo la yagi nyamlen la yora, mapawe di pe khabo dawas. 지 데라 삼로 땅와 삼기라 데라 고도 찌와 삼기 냠레 콩수 치와래 지 용고면 도와스 제잔스라 아니 간조기 데이터 냠레 콩수 치바 용야라스라 아니 곰래지라 데기 데이터시 데이터 벳 메도 미롱아지 차겨르 베스라 카인스나 삼로 땅와 삼기스라 아니 소소기 메진나라 지 주줄 최고야 된대라 근데지 제토벨라디 네바면 도와스 디스 카보다르기도 와스 고랑기 게르기 용완토네 시나 양스라 삼로 가제 떠나야 시우시우 주와지 땅마토야 다 곰지 자용도 좀 배신 디스 랍치아요 저도 디스 주와이나 디스 통아요 저도 근데기 용완도 지체송스 제자 가요라에기 냠레 콩수 추야라스라 아니 간조기다 곰라에디 메두미롱아지 차기여레 베스
네, 단나페는 가서 엔데다기야. 사직 수우다. 펜지 라바 잠지는 네바탈라 펜지람 슬래시라. 라, 먼저 내가 로바 잠지기 내 힘바리 삼지 디고 말아. 딜도니 디 하코이걸 된다 진짜 참아. 라. 하코니 다 딜레페는 얘기디 이페네 지다 소 컨트롤로지를 샤와이나. 컨트롤 마바나 갈을 쥐어 카르도. 라. 텔을 쥐어 카르도. 풀을 쥐어 카르도. 예빵바이나 아니 캡산 카르도. 라. ini ani rang ne bache jen ne bache samang ga do ra ani su su tse de la chi jen ka chewa shima la chi wo ka chewa shima ke ma la ni na su su khon do ji pang tu wei na ani su su tra to mo sin na ra ja bo them bo ni su ka ta na ye de yen de to mo ne do de ni yu da che sang di ngang ze lam sa khon do ka go de chi bo chi la ji gi di go ma ka go bi jin se de ta ti ne pa go pa da 라 안테 고바 투 고바 마보저라 대삼마 삼땅 슈첨도 그러면 대가라 로로 잠지부지데 말해 디 담불로 아니 셈바라 고아차니 양데야들로 제선 양양 고물라기도 라 가서 테마치긴 가는 게 통고 말해 라 야시 그래 솔로라 담보 가서 빼 상율인데 디데 냠네 가와치 투그레 사마에나 양자 선다 다디데 왜 바치레샤사 아니 단도 못하는 저와 데데 지투사에서 수수기 라네타 투시리고라 담보 투 빼는 가서 엔데송이야 담보 자체투바 마도 질 소라 바디 중류 타지 담벌 차라 담보 투바 치고레스 투바면은 가서 곰제는 아니 에 칼로 투바메부 곰바들 라돈 타는 잡아나신 라이자 담보 투바 치고레스 투바 치니 아니 투 안디질 디갈라 산노땅 되네 곰라 된들려고레스 어디 베케션보다 계시간서 지 투바지에 멤버나 아니 pena lamsanga gomjegi lana kana lacharo lapa sinsa chiyo mara bid lapa niriri na ketalan zagi na karigin jugi injisa de yo mara tende insa inji minji tambo di temlo yuju de lo ani sanatang ani kari de so epe kichambra.
Yes. So now when we are talking about how can we effectively or practically inculcate these things into our daily lives, can we do it? Is it the case that we cannot inculcate and practice these things without meditation in our daily lives? That contemplation in itself doesn't really help us to practice these effectively. Now herein, it is important to understand that both are important, and it is a causal process from the Buddhist perspective. It is a causal process. And for example, first, we need to understand that the contemplation that we undertake should be a process wherein we are able to relate the teachings to our own experiences. This is very important, and that the contemplation is informed by a sense of placing value on empirical evidence in our own daily lives. That this is indeed true, it happens in my life, this is what I experience, so what the teachings highlight makes sense. So if we are able to approach contemplation in this manner, then it becomes an active and meaningful contemplation, wherein we are trying to relate the teachings to our own experiences. So for example, when we contemplate on the negative consequences of anger, it should not be the case that we contemplate simply on the fact that, okay, anger is something bad, we should not really be let ourselves consumed by that. And if the contemplation ends at a simple recognition like that, then there is no conviction in the act itself. So rather than that, relate it to our own experiences. How, in a moment of anger, did you react? How did that reaction affect your immediate relations? And not just immediate relations, but also other people too, yourself, other people too, and not just in that immediate time frame too, how it affected the relation over a long time. And then if you begin to relate it and with empirical evidences from your own experience and your own lives, then the contemplation becomes effective. Then now on the basis of that contemplation, then we can begin to cultivate a meditation aimed towards overcoming anger by cultivating a mind that is fostered with love and so forth as an antidote to anger. Now, from the Buddhist perspective, it is very clear that there is a causal process which leads us to practically inculcating these things into our daily lives. That first, we need to engage in listening to the teachings. Listening herein broadly refers not just to listening to the teachings, but studying the teachings. And then secondly, not just studying the teachings. After listening to the teachings, one should be able to introspect on the meaning of the teachings, contemplate on the meaning of the teachings. Now we already discussed that contemplation means being able to relate this to our own experiences. And then on the basis of these two, then we arrive at the place of meditation, wherein we are trying to now totally take this on as a part of our spiritual practice. So without listening, without study, it is said that immediately jumping to meditation is like a person without any hands trying to climb a rocky hill. It is impossible for such a person to climb a rocky hill. So in order for meditation to be effective, it must be preceded by the process of listening to the teaching, studying to the teachings, and introspecting and contemplating on the teachings on our own. And only then can we effectively take this on and inculcate these into our daily lives as a part of our spiritual practice.
This is my gom the curriculum. You don't let chair down, and if I let you Lagano coin, that the Zozo de me the Zom and the Dejla, till a gom chipuch coda. Ah, Jenna the Zoo and Nega the Pingy, the Kalana, and so be color the me on my Ombunga the business with reject just stuck Judora. Nalandon, Shillandon, that didn't change. To Zula Nego Kayachi, the Capados about hiring the Shah, name me medium the Madis Kagus and Bude and Naked Jilang the Lodi, Kago, they put them which Jinze Dembigana Kayamar. Taku Zankaro in Shasha Ramato. Kago be Jinze Hare, Gobakare, Pula Karne, the Karapang, Tenesan Tayamara. Hine, the Digit Gomje, the Pempe Gorda. Nego. Hine. That's the Pagilachita Gom Society Calore Ujumudo Gomina. Uya Yale, tell Santa Mapa, Telechibu, Tantigal, San Shimbache Gomara. And this guy Jita, they gom Comarilla, they mara. So when they get to tattoos, Ranju pin the Shashanatimu to the Papango, take Carping, Caranudu, Che the Pud, this is some Sanatani, and the Pacago. Then oh, that then when a Magana woman do to the Jimmy of the Pango at the Resa, some lord, but think about the Chesona. That the gom on the Senior, and the gomlet and Chegom the Jom Laniera. Ra, Jay the Gomba the Carry Pigeons, what's such a time? Jogom Ladigala, Lodi and Roma in the Taran, Jichil nature, the Shire.
So now, in this day and age, many people have the idea that meditation simply means staying in a place of worship like a temple or such an environment, staying silently, focusing on our breath, and then not allowing any thoughts to arise or not allowing the mind to be distracted, and to place the mind simply on our breath, and then they think that that's the extent of meditative practice. Now, of course, I'm not saying that this does not constitute meditation at all. This is a part of meditation. It is a technique used, but it is sort of a preliminary practice wherein you are trying to restrain the sense doors, the sensory mind, to be not distracted, and allowing the mind to kind of stabilize a bit, by focusing on a single object such as the breath. So it has immediate benefits. It helps us to kind of experience a sense of calm from the incessant thoughts and emotions that come in our minds. But is that the purpose of meditative practice? then from a Buddhist perspective, that is not the ultimate or the true purpose of meditation. The true purpose of a meditation, as the true task of a practitioner from the Buddhist perspective, is to be able to overcome and abandon the negative emotions that trouble our minds. So even though for immediate purposes, such practices as breath meditation help us to kind of overcome it for short term, but does it really help us to effectively overcome our negative emotions in the long run? Then it doesn't really help us. So that's why in Buddhism, we think of meditation as more than a technique simply to kind of allowing the mind to rest in a suspended state. We talk about different types of meditation: analytical meditation, stabilizing meditation. Analytical meditation is used to investigate the nature of our emotions, where they come from, the function of our emotions, how it affects us. And then through that kind of analytical meditation, we need to come to a place of confidence, into a place of conviction. Indeed, I need to overcome my negative emotions from their root. I need to abandon these negative emotions from their root. So this is the purpose of meditation. Now, of course, it is the kind of gradual stage of development that initially we feel like, oh, this is not something that I can do at all. But through, as we already said, that meditation is understood as a process of familiarization with the object you are analyzing or with the object that you are concentrating on. So over time, even though your immediate or initial reaction might be one of saying that I cannot do this, this is beyond me, but through that process of familiarization, you come to a place over time wherein you are able to concentrate, where you are able to perform rational analysis of situations, emotions, nature of reality, and so forth. Yes.
Gomla di jiya chotoja ya. Kima meji zuba gomla shu di ache. Ani chigi kala chora an kachila nga zuba gomla ra. Te ko ngone zuba gom tu de ta chora zuba gom chama sala. No kolam zalu la ba dila khati cha ja. Ta dinro chu so na nga gom je gila di ache shulo mondo di chada mosala khati cha matuna dinro cha gora.
So there is a particular story which highlights the approach that one needs to take towards meditation and what kind of approach is not advised. So among the circle of Tibetan practitioners, this story is recounted again and again. So it is said that once there was a person who said he was meditating on tolerance or forbearance. And someone asked him when he was meditating, what exactly are you meditating on? And then the person began to answer, I am meditating on forbearance or I'm meditating on tolerance. And then immediately the person who asked this said, oh, if you are meditating on tolerance, then eat shit. And then immediately the person who was supposed to be meditating on tolerance retaliated by saying, you eat shit. So maybe that's not the approach that one needs, that is advised when we take meditation as a practice. That is not the purpose of meditation.
Nato gom Lisa. Nato gom jana sana tawa ina matapa ta to mani khari san tawa ina ra. Sana tang chadi gala ani lamsa ngazo dile dra ta tizi pa mila dole chema go tizi sana ta e jichi so go pe ke chama da. Chema ngazo shu gom jegila jiya jenge ji tola pedi gala ani tame pa zan digumda ra. Kada doje ni metu di chubezu. Jenge to de pedi tame pa la ja. Tido chego. Ra. 그거 kontrolan 거서 잡아째 거서 그거 거서 그거 지라서들 따따따 지드나 아니 그거네 곰디래요 말 근데 이거 그거 있어질 카디 짜투니 봐 들 님부 드투니 지잖아 아니 오네 곰도 쳐요.
So herein this anecdote highlights the true purpose of meditation and the true approach towards meditation. Meditation should help us to become less reactive to adverse situations, two sets of challenges that we face. Things that challenges our sense of peace, a sense of calm. Meditation should help us to be less reactive, or to react in a more wise manner to a particular situation. So in Tibetan, we have another saying which says that with regards to philosophical views, you are an advanced practitioner, but with regards to conduct and practice, then you are a beginner. So this highlights the fact that even if we continue to kind of expound intellectually, discuss about all these things, and when we are irritated by someone, by the smallest kind of disturbances, if our reaction is like that, then we are indeed a beginner. Questions?
Is it possible to explain again about emptiness?
Thangpa gola yanjo kone chidishi jatu gore bes.
Thangpa ni le la ni mara ta. Pena nganzu thangpa la de ga ra. Tanda nganzu ngara tsu ngala khari thu de na. Nganzu gi demba thu ban zene ra. Yu khari do thu de. Yu ngoi de tsila nganzu chik thong de da sama demba ra pa. Ya yu khora ngala tsila nganzu la chik namba ti ni thu yu ba chikele ngora. Nde ba tsaga do na. Ta chida gi demba la ta toni ta shadan ram de yo ra. Thudan ram de shadan. Nganzu ba tsaga do na. Di nyu gre de mar. Pachaji ran na nye mi jiro jo. Ra. Tinde we di chida ta ya di na la siye to chu khara pesha khari na house. Ma thonga ne thonga ta mai. Pachaji ta ni mani wa ta gara ani toni to re la shi ra.
So now when we are talking about emptiness, we need to preface it by saying it is not something easily understood. And with that being said, it is also important to understand that there are differing interpretations of emptiness within the many different traditions of Buddhist schools. Now, a particular interpretation of emptiness is explained in this manner, that when we look at anything that exists, how does it appear to us? It appears to exist in and of themselves. It appears to exist as truly existent, truly established. Now, what do we really mean by truly established or truly existent? That it exists on its own, without depending on any causes or conditions. So now emptiness is the wisdom which helps us to overcome the mistaken notion that things appear as they exist. Now, for example, when we investigate this further, take the example of a pen. Now the pen appears to exist as a pen in and of itself. So we say that the pen is truly existent because we mistake it to exist as it appears, right? Now when we look for the pen which is supposed to be truly existent, where exactly is the pen? When we look at the nib, the body of the pen, the different parts of the pen, the thing that we call pen is not findable among what makes up the pen. So now, some masters say that when you look for the thing that you are looking for and you do not find anything, that's emptiness. So yeah, some masters explain it kind of succinctly in this manner, that if you begin, if you are looking for something, and if you find that what you are looking for it does not exist, then that's emptiness. So yeah.
So what are the causes and conditions that make a pen?
Now there are koi dilagi do nyugu ya duela juje mambo jioro as ni kare resta dizo. nyugu drubera nyugu dang anzu
Cheta
ki dempa
yugo
drubera
senyi de yugo le de rangchu tuyo marwa. Ta dipen di zoya jucha chukora. Di zoji ki company zota kora. Di zonyi mi kansa chukora. Ra. Ani di su shin da ta cha da sama jije mambu jil ten tsuwa le ra. Kora rangchu ki pen ko dembe ngona su tuyo mar. Ine ngangchu kan haya de la shota ji ji nango la kora rashi ki tsu de ke ngangchu sanu ko de kora. Ine dizu sama chik la mambu ji ten de ra. Tende isa ten de do shire de. 이내 코를 두해라 주도 젠다 가서 조아보다 코라기다 딜을 취해 고지다 라 가르치 사체면은 좋아 참 맞아 봐도 디차기 말아 되고 그랬어.
So now this now pushes the discussion even further, wherein we just talked about causes and conditions. Now we need to understand the term when we use the qualifier truly established. What do we exactly mean by truly established? When we say that we mistake things to appear as they exist, then we impute an objective existence of a pen. We think that the pen exists objectively as a pen. From the object side itself, it establishes itself as a pen. It exists as a pen. So if it exists objectively, it necessarily follows that it is free from causes and conditions, right? Because the pen is objectively able to establish its entity, its existence, right? Now, when we begin to analyze it, we realize that the nib of the pen is made out of metal, there's plastic, there are so many different components and parts to the pen, right? So these parts come from other causes and conditions, such as an iron ore from which this piece of metal is mined from, the plastic, a petrochemical factory from which this plastic is manufactured, and so forth. Then we realize that the pen in itself does not establish itself as a pen. It is the coming together of so many causes and conditions which establishes the existence of a pen. So it's dependent on causes and conditions. It's not independent of causes and conditions.
Tatana azu nyugudo jila shara tanga nyugudiga samtana azu shullo la kar pengen ha masta khande susu michi tanga miji yimi chanira namdi o tanga sukhala tem mo yin ngala chi juno no jina ngala yu tam henda yana ngala yu chi nami pitu yana ngala yu nga sukhan tem mo chi yu sa ngaji chi yura ngaji chi miji na tende samta na rashigi nyamchu chaja tende nyamchu chawa na karina milan daso yana karina pengra susu ngamato me sana ngaji chimo yana milan zaya da susu kawadona tes kale kaw chegda chisa ngazu ta susu tende samta o nga kasa ka tende tang pena nga doji na ngi susu lu tuya de kora pama la tende ra tende ma ta susu tanda kala saya na shen la ten kora togu na susu shen la ten kora kerazi na togu ta susu kari na ta kolo to susu kale jene nyo na sang kora ra susu ki chi lega le ni ngu sa nyo yorte nyo sa diga pagila di zota da tuzu bizu chira konzu sa da chuda me da mambo jin chi chini nganzo la long chue chira tega na shi nganzo saya de pena nganzo de ro ji sa na de de unsa gi pagi singa moni gi da po chi singa che ani pagila ta dina chuda le da tende ra tini se da tane mambo ji te pe di color le labu ji gala nganzo ra go ma chesa nganzo chama chigla chi den ga ra chigmene chig tanda ina nganzo de sa de dil khoyu la tende di den de la tende di khala sonyi la tende obviously la ga chi tende ra an kara zu tsu undu ga la ani bas no ina khande namdo no ina usagi dil la tende ra ani kashi ya tsu undu ga la kashi tiga do chi gi nyo ro kwa che na tende ji la tende khanda ma ji chama tende ra di tende wa sa no de khona rashi gi mi o nga ra cha wa chi me nga dembo tu nga ra chu tu ba chi me nga chama tende yo san susu gi ma nyamchuru chegda.
So now, as we kind of explore this with the example of a pen, I'm not sure how you will be able to relate the concept of emptiness with regards to our own personal practice. So it is important to be able to relate the concept of emptiness with regards to our own personal practice. So in order to do that, think about the fact that we talked about how the pen appears to exist independently, absolutely, as a pen, and we mistake that appearance to be the reality of the pen itself. So similarly, with regards to ourselves, and our conceptions of who we are, we have a conception which holds the I or ourselves to be absolute, to be independent. We have such a conception. And now, through that conception, we develop attitudes of self-cherishing, we develop attitudes of arrogance, and so forth. So emptiness, our contemplation of emptiness, should be able to help us overcome these self-cherishing attitudes and arrogance that stem from grasping at ourselves as being truly independent, truly absolute. So, when we think about ourselves and our existence, we might get the idea, or we kind of live our lives with the idea that I exist independently, I exist absolutely. But when we look at the manner in which our very sustenance, the possibility of our sustenance, then when we look at it carefully, it depends on so many different interrelated connections of causes and conditions. We will not be able to sustain ourselves without depending on these interrelated connections of causes and conditions. For example, think about the fact that when I look at myself, think about the clothes that you are wearing. Even though you might proudly say that, okay, I worked for the money that I earn, and then as a result of by spending the money that I earn, then I bought this cloth. But this fails to take into account the labor which goes into making this cloth, processing, sourcing the materials, and so forth, and which leads, if we neglect that reality, then we become very self-centered, we become very selfish, and we become arrogant. And then also think about how such attitudes of being self-centered, being arrogant, affects our interactions with others, affects the way in which we live our lives, and how there is no real intimacy or closeness we build with other people when the interaction is always marked by our own sense of importance, being importance and arrogance. So also try to think about a single grain of rice, a rice that we consume as a staple diet, then how this rice come to be due to the confluence of so many causes and conditions coming together. The labor of the farmers, the weather, the weather, sunlight, and so many different elements. Then, so if we are able to contemplate in this manner, then we begin to realize that I, as such, cannot exist and sustain independently. So then our initial sense of arrogance is overcome. Our initial sense of self-importance is overcome. So think about the fact that this gathering is possible, this course is possible, and this course is possible due to the labors of the kitchen staff, the management staff, the teacher, the students. So many things have to come together for this to be possible, for this event to transpire, to be possible. So if we are able to kind of think of it in this manner, then we will be able to overcome the manner in which we become consumed by a sense of being important, cherishing only ourselves, and then developing an arrogant attitude because of that.
Just the some time any rashi so the nyam chunjuro chaitara. Chita nyam chunjule the me ola gu kangiro karnyang ko de yamar de ne zamzang to ngama to me like ngajichli da. Ngaya shi ngajeshi ngades kana teongo me le. Tidile ona ani phagi migi tischi lawa da namsa khate chaya ro cha. Oh camera de ngam sama chipare ti khala tang so chila chine de re same ro chile na. Rashi ki nyam chu chaida. So the kitchen.
So it is through relating with the concept of emptiness in this manner and carrying the contemplation in this manner that we can look towards overcoming emotions such as arrogance, attitudes such as being self-centered, and then in its state we can cultivate an attitude of humility. Now, if we have an attitude of humility, we are more open towards people. And humility does not mean always hanging our heads low and bearing through others kind of humiliation, others kind of bullying. That's not what humility means, because when we think about the manner in which we act when we are consumed by an attitude which is self-centered, and when we are arrogant, then the attitude comes from a thought such as I alone matter, my concerns only matter, and as soon as these things are threatened, then you are immediately at odds with anything that you face. You have to always be challenging people, challenging situations all the time. So this does not really afford us a sense of peace at all. So in its stead, we can try to contemplate the concept of emptiness by understanding the interdependent nature of things, and then cultivate an attitude of humility in its place. Questions?
So, previously you said that when we are having the translation in English for these texts, but you mentioned earlier that when we read it in Tibetan, it's totally like maybe like a poetry, right? So I would think that maybe it is important for us to try to learn it in Tibetan. So, or I mean, like I guess the energy changes, right? But if we are trying to read it in English, that if we try to see it in Tibetan. So yeah, that is like
I don't really understand the question. You want us to recite it in Tibetan?
no, that I mean that it would be better for us if we recite it in Tibetan instead of reciting in English.
But you should be able to understand what you are reciting, right? Thagi nganzu dila warta nganzu gi tsawa duzu nganzu pyujina na chena ta lonzin chigyo ra namcho. Ani Kurangi dende laswas thagi nganzu gi. Ta ina nganzu ma jang yung duzu mba jur inji na dine jang godoas. Ta ini di ma Kuranzu chungnas ra, ma chore di pyuji na la yora, Kuranzu gi lonzin rawu chene ma churtu na yaga yore bes, chorto na yaga yore bes ra. Tida dewa mindula, tuyo ma gona chor na chikini marada.
Today inji meji ko chara Hindi tola shige na ti thanda dra Hindi tola shine inji tola shine Chinese jami tola khari tola shiwa na ti thanda de shine de wor mata inji meji phege tola go ya mara.
So that's not really necessary that we should be reciting it in Tibetan. If we do not understand the meaning of the verses that we are reciting, then it doesn't really serve any purpose. As long as we get the meaning of what is being recited, then that's the whole point. So if you find it more comfortable to recite it in Hindi, I'm sure there is a Hindi translation, and I'm sure there are translations of this in many different languages. So if you get the core meaning of the verses, that in itself should be enough. Now the point that was being made is, like, in English it becomes very wordy. It becomes like, in Tibetan it's very precise, it's rhythmic, it's poetic in that sense. So
inji tola te ze tsi rhythm ro da. Ra. Phege tola tak tola ka ta 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 jor diga te le singa le la yi jir mata. Shamba ke chaba yo mara. Anzu zo di ngara zo ge di rajo gi nyomo di tu ra. Remo do ke di khari ne di wa. Yama saje gi chusun di Sanskrit da Pali da ndam so ra. Tanda tanda de jaga ke ba je phege tola yare. Ke chaba de yo mara. So di nganzu tanda gi du go sa gi ngara zo gi maro yo lo di tu. This ne di wa.
So the purpose of reciting these verses and studying these verses is not to be able to recite it poetically. It is the ultimate aim or the purpose of reciting and studying these verses is to be able to overcome the negative emotions that disturb our mind. So the language barrier doesn't really matter as long as we are able to get the meaning of what is being discussed. Because it is a fact that the Buddha taught in a different language than Tibetan. But we are studying it through a different language, but we are able to get what the Buddha taught. So the point that was being made is with regards to the ease of memorizing it, maybe in Tibetan it is a little bit easier to memorize it because it's short, rhythmic, and concise. But the meaning, I think, the translation, they have done an amazing job. Yeah, it's a good, very, very good translation.
Si mashi si kashi kenza yara. Hindi tola pe nyembo yana. Peke tola jidi yan nyembo me jindu da. Peke tola pe nyembo yana pa jidi de kenza yara. Ko da susu lola karate wade. So nanti war susu kare.
So we have to kind of dispense with the aesthetic value we seek in the way a word sounds in a different language, because it is indeed the case that some words which sound so beautiful in Hindi, when you translate it into Tibetan, doesn't really sound as good. But as long as the meaning itself is intact, then we should not worry about it too much. So, yeah.
And how being self-centered can cause other people harm by making self more important than other people. So what happens is the opposite when someone has low confidence. Like you said, people cannot. It does not mean that I will allow myself to get bullied. So how do we react to bullying?
The moi tiwa de gu taging anzogi ni soso ngaje chembo da chena ni minyam do chik tuna Thangpa do regere song roas ani ngaje dila chen esra milaya ni nöse da de mambu chigi roas ani ta tidan do nesra ni soso la ngaje menera sem shum de gi kashil kanye ji nguda chi denso da shida mejo
La
denso soso la denso da shida mejo de gi kanye shu chimbo chenye de roas ta Tendregi michilasra, any Korangla, the Mishindaki Nusedachi, the Dechinayora, Donechi, la Tapshikariores.
Mishimegi Koral Nisichina.
So Mingaje Chena, Shimpala Lamsan, Nulen Chetukamar was. Inayada, Korankani, the Shuchimbutigir was.
That Miji Chirana Chief Kadina Nisichi, Tsitsubalaya, the Karina. Chitamila Katijana, the Kodipasarora. Kara tsujila pajila ani diba sayada ra singyamba mambo mamushu kunzi chedura tele ani ko negabi yegi tashi tana digida yudi ra taso ta namiro ena kala kabu de ingere ra chitangi tele pe shu kati majana yaga yera ra kara miji tsuji chigina tele kaje jana pena nganzo ta mechunji gala ra me pasha ra digala sanulu magar madura ra 결국이 단단 어디 딜레어 단단 준준하게 치지야 사딘데다 고요 베데니 고에 칼라랑스 함디짠지 고에나 사디단지 요다 총来着라 딘데 위치로는 카데자데니들 야메 땅샤나 그 빠르 지진데 제메 차그라 라 커츠지 라쳐 바지라 커즈 딘데 베도 거로 남도 마르마르 군제 마르마르 다 마르마르 차로
So then when we are talking about humility, then humility also should be informed by a sense of confidence. Confidence in understanding that if you retaliate in a similar fashion to someone who is kind of making it a little bit difficult for you, then it doesn't help the situation. That you being tolerant in this situation actually helps the situation. It helps the situation in the sense that it does not kind of aggravates the situation. Aggravate in the sense that it inflicts further harm and suffering for yourself and others. So this is the kind of quiet place of confidence from which humility should come from. And now, for example, if we kind of react in a similar fashion to someone who kind of angers us, who angers us, then it's like adding fuel to fire if we retaliate in a similar manner. You might begin to use the same kind of language, then the other person begins to respond similarly, and then it blows up. The situation becomes worse. And what did it really achieve in the end? It made you more disturbed, the other person more aggravated. So humility comes from that place of confidence that you being tolerant in a situation helps to not aggravate the situation. So you save yourself and others from further suffering. So in the cultivation of forbearance, there is a particular verse from Shantideva's engaging the Bodhisattva's deeds, the Bodhicharya Avatara, wherein he uses this analogy. He says that if I were to find enough leather to cover the whole face of the earth in the hopes that I am not pricked by the thorns and bushes, then it's impossible. But if I think of covering my own 2 feet with leather, then I can walk about freely wherever I want to go. So this is what we mean by cultivating forbearance.
지니야 미지 그런 것을 통주로 지수지 지게나. 봐. 지체는 배경원의 미디기 저런 통주 지수 지게 유지를. 지체는 소소의 남도 알아서 파츠인절 남도여라. 남도가 게 나래 근데 지금도 사용한 나와 레스 인자를 순주 제 백해서 뭐라. 지수 엔데 중요해나 담보세시 제도에 따에 개점을. 지체는 준이 바로라 아니 가서 미스안스네 라이도 과로 발로라. 골로 테라고 엔데도 차대 시그라. 텐데로 장마조에네 수에 개점을. 다 계속 되면 가두이네 콜라처럼 진nhập 주로 지유나 잠자 코라디 nhập주 지고야기 잡로기 미들랜스나 강이로 가리네 요시라 라 그렇게도 마이나 코로나 라이프는 심바마치에로나 코로나 강이 심바지기지 저런네 민담을 리다 라 잠자 찌는 것도 단다다인 것도 시바나시기 콜라디 지고야 되래 콜라 카요 말에 그에 라와미죠 레뉴기 샤와제 인자 라 뉴모바오게 코디 쇼용 거라서 와 근데 이제 콜라 카요 말에 그 유모게 샤와제래 사와이나 라시긴 것도 로디 콜라 바 컨트롤해야 되면 윤로다 와 다들 마사지 콩알 가실라이나 예마라 스타리엘라도 아네레 딜라 로 도바찬 산나타나 결혼베드 거라 데마츠에 차로라 와 딜레페 개마들이 인데 요시그레스 지지나 코란세마 마체 인기래 지지나 가니 이때 코네테 인기래 코란라베 르르 샤샤나 마 뉴뉴로라.
So now, when we think about these experiences that we have in our interactions with others, when we get the impression that maybe someone is kind of looking down on you, trying to kind of intimidate you, trying to be condescending towards you, then it is important first to effectively investigate whether this is indeed true or not. Many times it might be the case that it appears that they are being condescending, trying to intimidate you, are looking down on you. And it is many times a result of ourselves projecting our own suspicions onto the situation. And then we say that, oh, indeed he or she is trying to look down on me and so forth, which is not the case at all. Now, of course, in some instances, people really kind of act condescendingly towards you, look down on you, intimidate you, and so forth. Now, in these situations, it is important to try to clear any kind of misunderstandings that you and that person might have, any kind of misunderstandings that you might have between yourselves. If you are able to address that, then maybe that person wouldn't act in the same way after that. It is important to address that, not just kind of leave it at that. And then many times when we look at people acting in this manner towards someone else, it is often the case that they themselves are going through a lot. So as such, they project their frustration onto others. And when you understand this, then instead of anger, instead of being reactive to such situations, maybe through that understanding, we can build a place for compassion in that interaction. And now, from a very broader perspective, from a dharmic practitioner's perspective, then one is encouraged to cultivate the attitude that as the other person is a human being, a sentient being, circling in samsara, then he or she is subject to karma and afflictions. So he is being influenced by the afflictions which torment and disturb his mind. So as such, it is liable for him to act out, or for her to act out in this manner. So then you kind of place a distance, place an emotional distance between yourself and the person as well as the situation. And as such, your kind of reaction towards that situation is not so emotional anymore. And as a consequence, you do not suffer emotionally. Yes.
아니 간저 단다 디샤샤오라 아니 저런 섬에 단에 니마 간절랑네 단에 지 사마 투르리 전에 야보 빼냐 소스라 아니 투지 셰셰다 아니 가시 슈세 되고 있습니다 구자가 슈나 디그레 산이노 마길레 데마보다 또 가르페지 땅디오라 아니 저르부 디샤라가 테스칼 카바이케 저런 제 디사디 야보면야 럽체디 갈라 셈바샤토 마라 이 야보나로 치스.
So then we'll stop here today. And thank you very much to all of you for really being attentive in the throughout the sessions, throughout the day. And I get the impression that maybe many of you are not comfortable sitting in this position on the concrete floor with a thin mattress. Then please try to make yourself as comfortable as possible. There are enough cushions there. You can take as many cushions as you want, because if you do not feel comfortable in the sitting position you are in, then I think it will be difficult for you to pay close attention to the teachings, in the class. So, see you all tomorrow. But before we end the session, on page number 31, we recite the dedications prayers.
Rinpoche maje pana jeju ji jewa nyamba meba ya gone gonde pewa shu jambe pae jida chemba dai kundu zambo deyan deshende deda gunje jizu dale je gewa deda tamje rado ngoye desu shebe jawa tamje ji ngowa kanlai chodo ngaba de dagi gewe zawa de gunja Sambo chuchi rado ngowa je pama sumje damje dedan denje je ngendro tanje tado tongwa dam chanjo semba kanai sushuba deda kunje molan drupchu chi.